Okay. This is a lot of fun. Okay, how many of y'all are really new in motion graphics? Never done motion graphics before? Okay, you've done some motion graphics. Anybody? Okay. How many have experience with motion graphics? Some experience? Okay. All right. And veterans? Any veterans? 3 years or more? All right. Movie credits? Okay. Well, let me. You know what? I'll start by telling you a joke. Actually, I looked up motion graphics jokes, and I had a lot of trouble trying to find any motion graphics jokes. But there are design jokes. So I looked at motion. So Comic Sans. Anybody? Comic Sans walks. Okay. Comic Sans walks into a Walmart. The cashier says, "We don't serve your type." Okay, I'm a dad. I have a 3-year-old, so you're gonna get those jokes, right? Okay. Welcome. So, putting love into your motion graphics. I saw a review of a TV show on YouTube, and the show was very beautiful and well produced, and it looked stunning. But it had some just story issues. It was difficult for a lot of people to feel like they connected to the characters. And this one review said, it just feels like the writers didn't put love into this. You know, they put a big budget into this. They put a lot of money and a lot of effort into the visual effects, but there just was something lacking in the story. Now in this particular case, I'm talking about motion graphics, so how can we take that concept of really investing your project with love, with that energy that gets you excited about the things that you're excited about? How can you take that and put it into your design? And what are some ideas? So I'm going to spend most of the time showing you After Effects, really, because at the end of the day, these are the sorts of things that actually, these are the ideas that I'm excited to share with you. What I actually have worked on and the things that excite me that I'm able to put into my projects. After Effects is a motion graphics software. If you're not familiar with After Effects, it is a very powerful motion graphics software that you can use to do a lot of 2D animation. It has some 3D space capabilities, but it's really all about, you know, it's really not a dedicated 3D program, it's a 2D environment. So you're able to do a lot of really cool work, and I'm going to show you a demo that really is mostly just After Effects. And you'll see some 3D stuff in there. I use a number of plugins to kind of get this, get some of these effects. Let's see if it'll play. Okay. All right, so thanks. So, whoop, there we go. Let's get that off there. Okay. So that's After Effects. That's like all After Effects, you know? There might be a few 3D models in there here and there, but as far as the finished product, that's in this one program. So you can do a lot, right? And there's a fantastic website that I've referenced many times. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's called Video Copilot, and the guy is Andrew Kramer. He is a visual effects artist, I think, out in LA, and he's a rock star of tutorials on the internet when it comes to video and visual effects, and everybody thinks about him when they think about tutorials, even motion graphics and visual effects. But one of the things that I've learned from Andrew Kramer is he's got a mindset when it comes to After Effects and when it comes to motion graphics. And that mindset is all about basically taking your fundamental knowledge of what the program is actually doing and rearranging it in very compelling ways where you would never think, oh, this program can achieve this effect. And he's able to just continue to blow people away with what he can do in Adobe After Effects because he's willing to take the time to really invest his effort into that. So when it comes to putting love into your motion graphics, what are some thoughts that you might have about this? What are some thoughts about how to go about putting love into motion graphics? Anybody?
Giving your text some sort of texture.
Okay, texture, yes. Detail, right? Anybody else? Yes.
How it can create emotion.
Yes, focusing. How it can create emotion, focusing on what you want people to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And to piggyback on that, a lot of your transitions or type treatments or whatever can imitate or invoke the emotion that you're trying to portray in the
Yes.
overall project.
The type and the emotion can invoke what you're trying to communicate. Yeah, rad transitions. Yes, exactly.
Experiment with timing.
Timing.
This is everything.
Very good. Experimenting with timing. Yeah. I'm getting some good stuff. Anybody else? Putting love into your motion graphics. So these are all great. And this is really right down the line of what I'm thinking as well. It has to do with investing my project with that emotional energy where when I'm watching, I can relate to it, right? And animation is really not about creating something real. It's about creating something that has realism. So realism would be this relatability, where if something is falling on the ground, a ball is bouncing on the ground, it feels like it could be an object, even though it's completely flat, cel-shaded and all that. It has this kind of feel that we can relate to in the real world. There are things like that just show that the artist took the time to observe the world and to enjoy investing that observation into our work. So the first thing, really, if you want to put love into your motion graphics, which I do, is to develop a really good, strong grasp of fundamentals. And I've been doing this for a long time, like 15, 16, 17 years. I've been doing motion graphics for a long time. It's only recently that I really started to realize my lack of knowledge as it relates to just simple animation fundamentals. So who's heard of the 12 principles of animation? The 12 principles of animation? Who can name some of the 12 principles of animation?
Squash and stretch.
Squash and stretch. Anticipation. Anybody else? Timing and spacing. Very good. Yes. Anybody else?
Appeal.
Appeal. Very good. Do you know all 12? You teach it. All right. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. Yeah. Follow through, overlapping action, right? These are the rock star Disney animators, of that generation who are animating Snow White and et cetera, et cetera. came up, they discovered these principles that created appealing, real animations with realism that were extremely attractive to audiences. I mean, clearly, the films did very well. So on the second sheet of your handout, there's a little assessment, and it's rated on a scale of 1 to 10, and you don't have to do this now, but this is for you, to really sit down with yourself and say, where am I at as it relates to these fundamentals, right? If I were to go through and do this, I confess that I'm not at a 10 on any of these. I really need a lot of work. And I've been realizing that lately as an artist, after doing this for years and being professional and having a job and being a freelancer and all of that, and I'm going back to school, so to speak. So I got a course on, I signed up for a course on schoolofmotion.com, and this is a 3D design course actually for Cinema 4D. It's a motion graphics and 3D animation app that's dedicated 3D, and I am really loving this season where I can invest in my skills. And one of the great things about School of Motion is they really try to hammer home fundamentals like the 12 principles of animation, like principles of design, like lighting and cameras. In fact, one of the assignments we had was called Your Inner Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is known for this awesome camera placement in his movies that are all about telling story. He's all about serving the story with where he puts the camera. But I would watch a Steven Spielberg movie and I would enjoy it. I might not know why, right? And because people would tell me I'm talented, I would just go off and do work without necessarily studying. And the problem is I stunted my growth for years because I didn't focus on getting these fundamentals. So there's a lot of work I would love to be doing right now that I don't have the skills to do. But I got to this point, maybe having a couple kids kind of got me there, but I'm like, this is my life. This is not gonna start at some point, it's here. So I'm gonna focus on building my fundamental skills. I'm gonna start doing better work. I'm going to put more stuff online, all that, to really develop myself as an artist and develop my craft. So that, if you resonate with that, I'm right there with you because I'm professional. This is what I do. But I'm going back to school, okay? If people tell you you're talented, talent is not enough. It's one of the #1 things that's kept me down, is people telling me I'm talented and me believing it too much, okay? Or at all. So knowing the purpose of your project is really helpful in understanding and really knowing how to put love into your project. So really, at the end of the day, if a project doesn't have a purpose, you can do just anything or nothing. What's the point, right? You have to have a point. And so if you're working with a client, get the point. Ask the questions that get you to those answers. On this third sheet of your handout, I pulled this from madebyloop.co.uk, but there are 5 questions, example of front-end questions to ask. These will help to give you a start on the types of questions to ask when you're approaching a project. This will give you a sense of direction. And at the end of the day, the purpose is the director. The purpose is basically what we're serving. And that's what the story is about. At the end of the day, are you selling a product? Are you preaching the gospel? Are you trying to communicate some sort of emotion to mobilize people to take action? At the end of the day, we as motion designers are not just sitting here turning out pretty work. We're trying to serve our clients. We're trying to serve our end viewer. If you're turning out your own personal work, it's really the same thing, except you're the one that gets to decide what the purpose of this piece is. So if you're putting up awesome video on Instagram, it's the same thing. What am I trying to communicate? You could go a million different directions, but pick a direction, pick a purpose. Are you trying to work on a specific skill? Is this a squash and stretch, 12 principles of animation video where you're trying to really hone your skills? Then that's the purpose. Focus on that and make it and really put yourself into that. The third element of putting love into motion graphics has to do with something that I'm not terribly good at, which is your workflow and your logistics, creating your project files and pacing yourself. I'll just say one thing. By the way, this handout has more information than what I'm saying here, so definitely use it as a resource. But the one thing I'll say about project logistics at this point is time tracking has been really useful to me. I got a little app called Office Time, and I just click the green play button or whatever, and it just starts recording time as I work. And this is really, project after project has given me a sense for how long things take. Because typically, things take longer than you think they will. You could estimate, this will take me 100 hours or something, and it takes you 150. These things just, motion graphics can tend to just eat up a lot of time. And so that's been super helpful. These are the sorts of structures. So knowing some fundamentals, really studying and loving the art form. So one of the things you can do with this assessment is pick one that you're interested in and go to town learning that particular skill. And you can do all kinds of learning online. I mentioned School of Motion. And then developing an understanding for the purpose of your project, getting your project logistics together. How long do things take? How long do I need up front? Leaving some time for R&D, research and development, trying out new techniques. Things like that can really be helpful in giving you, I find a lot of energy in the research and development phase, where I'm developing new techniques or something that I haven't done before. The final thing, and I'm kind of rushing through these because I just want to show you After Effects is really what I'm going to get into next, is really developing the balance between attention to detail on the one hand and your deadline, and the fact that you have to get things done, and the fact that it's you don't have forever to work on these projects, especially if you're doing client work. They expect their thing. They got their event. This thing's going up on social media or wherever. They want that explainer video, and so it's difficult to get a sense for how much effort I can put into this, how much time it's going to take to get a really good product, but then also get it done on time. So I'm going to show you some ideas, things that I've done to kind of tackle some of these. Okay, so first I'll show you, this is a basic style frames collection from one explainer video. So you can see this actually really helps to plan out your project. The more of this you do on the front end, where you go basically scene by scene and design these storyboards / style frames, because this is basically the final look, or very close to the final look, but it's also storyboards because it shows you the progression. And so you match this to your script. So doing this really helps to hone in on your visual palette, your message, your colors, and how you're going to visually communicate that. Save you a lot of time rather than just jumping into After Effects, throwing some elements together and starting. So this really helps to give you a sense. Maybe I want to use this character, but then I'm working my way through the animation. I say, okay, I need a character, but then I don't really build that character with the functionality I need here. Maybe I need that character to do something later on. And so just thinking your way through the project at the very beginning is a great way to be able to invest that creative energy, that love, and put that into the details of your project without having to always be tinkering with your structure. All right, so let me show you some character rigs. This is interesting to me, but here's a really simple scene. This actually took me quite a while to design these characters, but the animation is really simple. Let's see if this will work. Okay, so it's a family. They're all just kind of right? Okay, so here's what I did. I started by doing some test renders with just the mother and her son. I think that's what it was. And so she's basically, she has a little bit of movement. I had this fancy character rig that I was building. And I was able to get some of this movement going. I was even using a little physics engine in After Effects called Newton. Anybody use Newton? Anybody? Okay, so it's this cool program. You're able to create physics simulations in After Effects. So I was using that, and it was very cumbersome. After Effects is slowing down. And what I realized throughout this project is a complicated character rig that can do anything you want, that is very cumbersome, is not necessarily the best solution to actually get this thing done. So what's a beautiful approach that I can use that doesn't require all of that overhead? And I realized that in my desire to create this cool automation where this thing would work in a lot of different boards, I was going to run out of time, basically, if I kept doing it like this. So I started to simplify it. Maybe I don't need the character to be that functional in every single scene. Maybe all I need to animate is a limb here and there, right? This scene was probably by far the most complicated because it's the most characters moving. But in a lot of the scenes, I only have 1 or 2 characters. So, by the way, I'm still learning how to draw, so the proportions on her hand is... I was looking at this and I was like, that's tiny. This probably should be bigger. Anybody can draw? Anybody recognize that? Okay, so anyway, so this is an example of I'm looking at my work now and I'm saying, this is why I need fundamentals, okay? All right, so that would be one. Let me see if I can pull up some of the partial rigs. Okay, so check this out. I've got these characters slide in. Okay, see the animation's real simple, right? It's just like her leg is moving. I think her heel's tapping, and then the mom, she's just kind of like this, you know, kind of rubbing the back of her head, and then the dad's just kind of leaning over. Very simple, but these sorts of things, the mom's legs are moving. These sorts of elements are really great rather than just sliding in characters. You know, they're in for an interview with some lady, and so they're sliding in, right? They could be just 2 graphics. You could design them real well, and they slide in, they slide out. So in this particular case, putting love into motion graphics was, what can I do to give a little bit of personality to these characters, right? So what can I do to make this kind of a little bit more compelling? So she leans forward, she's interrogating this young girl, right? So we've got the parents, they have to do the talk, and then, so there's this kind of just small amount of animation really does help. But I didn't need to break out and create fancy, complicated character rigs, right? So I'm able to just take a few different, do a few different things. Let me see if I can even open one out here. Okay, so see, he's just kind of bending like that. Not too many layers, but here's kind of what it looks like. Oops. And these are shape layers. If you're familiar with After Effects, shape layers are awesome. You're able to create all kinds of, there we go, see? So this is just like segments of this guy. And then I use this puppet pin to kind of bend him backwards. So he just has that little motion, bending with the spine like that. Okay, so, but it's really simple. I didn't have to do too much work. And the more I worked on this particular project, the less I tried to do these full, heavy character rigs. All right, let's see. Here's another example. So this girl's falling out of a tree. It's pretty basic. Her legs are moving a little bit. It's slow motion. But it's very simple, and it's better. It's better than just flat objects that just pop on screen and then pop off screen. But it's also not, full-on cartoon animation. The idea is that the more I study fundamentals, the more I'm able to do in a shorter period of time. So this is one of the best ways to put love in your motion graphics, is to develop your skills so that you become faster and better. You become a faster artist and a better artist. It's the best of both worlds. And then you're happier and happier with your work. Of course, your standard is probably growing too, right? So you always can continue to learn and grow. All right, here's another character. Another simple character. Carrying that student loan debt, right? So just try to kind of give this character just a sense where it's heavy, okay? Even her leg is stretchy, you just kind of like, So I'm trying to think about how is that gonna feel? How is that gonna look? Can I try to invest this character with some weight, with some, this is heavy. Now, one thing I see as I'm watching this is if I were to critique this, I'd say, okay, the debt, I would like to see more squash and stretch with the debt. So as she's fallen, it's kind of just squishing, kind of like creating that sense of weight, okay? Now you'll see, when I say putting love into your motion graphics, I would even be thinking of little things like the tassel here. You notice that? The tassel is just kind of turning, right? And that's just a little rotation. I don't think that was anything very much more complicated than that. But little things like that. Say you get artwork. In doing explainer videos, I often get artwork from illustrators to animate. And the illustrator might have broken this out or might not have broken this out in Illustrator, in Adobe Illustrator. So I might be going in and creating layers, separating out these assets. So I'll take this, this tassel, separate it out so that I can animate it. But it's really just a matter of getting a sense for what those elements would be. Because I don't necessarily need everything. I don't need her hair to be wavy here. I don't need every single thing separated out, just a few. Another thing that really helps, I think, in this particular case is her shoe. You can see that's bending here as she walks, right? So now that did create more of an issue for the character rig, because the one I was working with I didn't really understand how to create that functionality. So I actually had to kind of use 2 character rigs, but it still kept it pretty simple. Let me see if I can try to pull up what that looks like. Okay, so you can start to kind of see some of the controls here. We've got this control right here, so I can move this forward. Obviously, it gets kind of funky with the direction. I'd have to fix the foot rotation and all that. But you can see this character rig is pretty simple. If I stretch it out too far, obviously you start to see some creases and stuff, and the artwork is, you're getting to the edge of the artwork. But, this is how I would create a walk cycle, And this, what I'm showing you here, is called inverse kinematics. So this is a type of character rig where you're able to actually move the leg, but you're actually also able to move the hips, for example, and it doesn't affect the position of the foot. So the foot can be anchored to the ground, you can move the hips forward, and you're still anchored to the ground, rather than trying to create somebody who's doing this with what they call forward kinematics, right? I'm walking, and then I'm trying to animate myself forward in position to try to sell the fact that I'm gaining ground. All right, does that make sense? Is that making sense? Okay, so this is really great. Highly recommend creating a rig like this if you're doing types of character animation. So see, I'm able to do this, and those feet are nailed to the ground. It's not going anywhere, right? So this is the first character I animated like this was not with inverse kinematics, what I'm showing you here. It was that other way, where you animate a walk cycle and then try to nail it to the ground, almost frame by frame in some cases. And it's very cumbersome, and I'm glad I don't have to do that. I'm using a program called Limber for this character rig. If you're familiar with AE scripts. If you're not familiar with AE scripts, go on AE scripts and you can find all kinds of cool plugins for Adobe After Effects. Some of them are more expensive than others. I think Limber was maybe $100, maybe a couple $100. I don't quite remember, but it's one of those, if you're going to do a lot of character animation, this is a fantastic plugin to use. There are other ones. There are more complicated plugins that, in fact, I used a little bit of one here, but it is a lot more cumbersome. And Limber is really great because it gives you the functionality, a lot of functionality to just create cool limbs that bend and use inverse kinematics without the some of the overhead and complexity of some of these other character rigging programs. Another thing that really helps to add a little bit more detail into your animation without too much work is simple lighting, right? So this character here, it's a very simple character, and I've got this kind of light falling on her. Now this is very simple. If you were to draw this, it'd probably come out a little bit different, where you're able to really kind of fine-tune how the light falls on her and really think about form and the volume of the character. In this particular case, I used a really quick effect where you got the character there, and so these are the sorts of things I enjoy trying to figure out. So look at all of these effects on this one layer. Oh, you can kind of not see there. Okay, so drag this over. Okay, see all these? So if I take them off, I start with this layer, right? And then I start to think through, okay, I need to separate, I need another copy of this layer, I need it to be the color of light, and then I need to add that back on. And After Effects has all kinds of effects. You could spend many days going through all of the effects that After Effects has. So I need to expand the edges so that I can create a fill that I can then move over, then cut out the original, and then move it back and tone it down, and then add a little distortion and a little glow, and then add back on the original, and then cut that out again, and there we go. That's the lighting, right? So these are the sorts of techniques that you can find at places like Video Copilot, School of Motion, things like that. They'll teach you a lot of what goes into these effects and how they work. And that's been very valuable. The more I learn about how these effects work, the more I'm able to take them apart and put them back together in the form that my project can use, which is really cool. Okay, so by the way, if you do have a little extra cash, there is a plugin called Shadow Studio 2. And I use this on another project, I think the other characters that I was showing you. And it does a lot of this even more beautifully. But again, you have to pay for some of this stuff. So this particular one, you can do all of this with just After Effects. All right. Let's look at 2.5D stuff. So who's heard the term 2.5D or 2.5D? Yes. What is 2.5D? Anybody?
Shaded or morphed 2D to look like 3D, but not exactly 3D.
Exactly. We're using 2D layers. We're using artwork. We're using elements that are two-dimensional, and we're putting them in 3D space. We're using things like projection, for example, where you're taking a 2D image and then laying out some planes in 3D space, and then what you can do is, from the perspective of the camera, you can project that image onto your 3D plane, that you create, and then you can kind of rotate the camera, and it makes it look like it's a little bit of a 3D environment. Got a lot of limits. It depends on the quality and the resolution of your source material, but you can do some really interesting things with that. So check this out. Check this one out. So this is 2.5D, 2.5D, and here's what it looks like. These roaches. Okay. So I was working on this project. Satire ridicules bad ideas. So there's the bad ideas. They're getting ridiculed. You know, and the roaches are crawling out. Originally, I had a magnifying glass, right? And the one of the people reviewing the work, one of the revisions was, maybe not the magnifying glass, let's have a flashlight and then roaches, And this is the sort of revision you don't really love at first, because it's like, how the heck am I going to put, okay, roaches crawling, and you could make it look really bad, because, it's like, what am I going to take a 2D roach and just kind of like move it? I could do that. It could be, stylized, but then I thought, well, I wonder, this is actually a Shutterstock image, and I will show you, I just broke it up into layers. Let's see here. Where are we? Okay, so check this out. There they are. They're moving around, and then they kind of pass by. Okay, so look at this. This is all 2D layers, and we don't get too close to it, so we really don't need a ton of actual 3D detail. But look, I'm able to kind of rotate around this. In fact, I think I have a, oops. There we go. Look at this. That's crazy, right? So I'm just doing this with the legs on a rotation, I'm just rotating the legs back and forth. I'm moving the whiskers back and forth, or the, what do you call those, the antenna, right? And it's actually creeping me out a little bit, because it's like, but it's pretty simple. So what have I got going on here? I've got one, this rotation, see that? So it's back and forth, and if I look, I actually used a little, they're called expressions, but After Effects can use simple JavaScript-based programming language to create some really neat automations. So if I just solo that, look, I only have 3 keyframes, but I add loop out cycle. This is just a simple piece of code, and it just says loop these keyframes infinitely. And that's all I need, because I don't need these roaches to ever stop. They can just keep moving, right? So I did a bunch of that. I'm sure these rotations are probably like that too. So we've got a leg there. There it goes. It's just kind of doing that, right? And again, 3 keyframes, very simple. But these are the sorts of things that allow you to put that little extra detail, that little extra energy into your project. And so the guy I was working with was, he liked this, so I sent him like a beauty shot of the roach. I'll show you. All right. Okay. Right. So we have fun. Hopefully that wasn't on the clock, right? All right. So the roach. I was really excited to show you guys that, because this is After Effects, and you don't need a 3D program for this particular thing. You can use that 2D stuff. This was. I'll even try to see if I can reveal and find. Okay. Okay, this is the file. That's the layer. I just pulled that from Shutterstock, right? So, boom. Just think about, okay, can I flatten that in 3D, and then can I use these elements, and like if I put them just perpendicular to each other in 3D space, will it work? And then I just duplicated this body to kind of give it that kind of fake depth, things like that. And I think I even in the final, there are little shadows. Yeah. So because it's in 2.5D, I can use After Effects lights, and then you get these little shadows underneath the roaches. Not too bad. Okay, here's a really simple example. This is a book animation. Now you could just slide your you might design a little book image in Illustrator, something like that. But look at this one. It's pretty simple. But I just used a little After Effects, and this is actually not 3D. This is more like a frame by frame situation. And I use the page turn effect, if you're familiar with the page turn effect in After Effects. And these layers some of them are kind of actually flipping in 3D space, as you can see. But it's really just this deformer that's happening. So I just turn that on and off. That's just a simple page, and then I layer those up. And then I think for the book turning, I changed the color of the front of the top of it like that, so that it would look like it's catching the light from the top. And that's really artificial. There's no After Effects light there. This is just like some shape layers, and then animated. Let's see, the top I think is just like frame by frame or something. I don't know. There's that one. Yeah, so look, these, oh, here's some keyframes. So sometimes I've been doing this more and more, where I just kind of try to animate these shapes like masks, right? I just kind of like animate them frame by frame. This isn't perfect. It should probably have more of an arc, but it appears really fast in the video. It's just like philosophy's mentioned or something like that. And so a book flies in and the pages turn, close and all that. So little things like that really help. We've got a pyramid with, I think we was talking about all the locations of the C.S. Lewis Institute. Started in Atlanta, I guess, and then, or no, this one actually I think started in DC, and then there's one in Atlanta, but then there's a bunch, around the country. So for this, the style frame basically looked like this, right? So sometimes you might be an animator, you might be an illustrator, you might, in this case, I'm doing both, so I designed this frame, and then when I get to the animation phase, I am thinking about how can I add some interest, visual interest as the script is playing. Sometimes what I'll find is I'm going through creating style frames, and when I get to animation, I didn't create enough style frames. There's not enough content for the script. The script needs more. It needs more love, right? So sometimes this will work, where you create kind of a, in this case, the thing spins around, so you kind of get, there's still some visual interest. If everything just popped out, it'd probably be on the screen for a second, and it might start to drag a little bit. But in this case, there's kind of a little bit more of a dynamic. And that just kind of helps to keep the momentum of your piece. Okay, so here's another fun one. This is, the background of this was, there's some article about how certain organizations spin the news, right? And so we've got the word news in a washing machine, right? Okay, so here's what that looks like. So it's like on wheels, it's masquerading as truth delivery, but it's really spinning the news, right? Okay, right, beautiful. So anyway, the content that I was given in the script and the footage I was given, it already mentioned a washing machine, so I didn't have to actually I didn't come up with that concept. But I was like, washing machines to spin the news? I'll, like find a washing machine. So I think most of that is Shutterstock. I had access to a subscription at the time. And then for the words inside, I used something called Newton, which I actually mentioned before. It's that physics system. So I don't actually have to hand animate this, as I also want you to be able to basically read the word news where the letters aren't just so jumbled where you can't still make out what it says. So what I was able to do was use this system and connect, I think I actually have, let's see. Yeah. So this is basically the setup, and then I use Newton here. Hopefully this will load up. Okay, so this is what Newton looks like. Awesome physics simulation. I think this was used for one of an Apple commercial. There's like where this ball just kind of keeps bouncing on things and going all over the place. It's really, really fun. But what I can do is I can take this, and then this is subject to dynamics, real world mimicking dynamics. So I'm going to make this. I think it's AEmatic. That'll mean, I think in After Effects I had it spinning, so it's already turning around, right? So you can kind of see what starts to happen. It's trying to mimic real world physics. So that's not quite right. I'll go ahead and add kinematic. I think that was the setting. Okay, so now it's turning, right? But news is just all over the place. But look how cool that is. That would be so hard to animate. So there we go. And then what I'm going to do is I think what I did was connect these with like a piston. You can do all kinds of machinery type stuff in here. So I'm just connecting these letters together so that as they get the friction takes them along, they kind of stick together. So let's see if that works, right? So there we go. We're starting to kind of still be news. And so with more tweaking, obviously, maybe tighten that up where those pistons aren't so flexible. But you can start to get the idea of what's possible. And so this is some of the stuff you can do with relatively inexpensive third-party plugins. And that's one that I used for this. So all I really had to do for that was, isolate it out. I'm just animating it with these elements. And that's really helpful. In After Effects, you can use what's called pre-composing, where you have a sequence, right, inside another sequence. And so you can duplicate that as many times as you want and really just kind of work isolated that way so that you don't necessarily have to do double work. Super helpful. All right, I will show you, oh man, I want to show you more than one more, but I will show you one more so we can do some questions. All right, another simple way to put love into your motion graphics. Here's some buildings. It's kind of a cute, art style, very simple, but I got all these layers and they're, bouncing on top of each other, right? And they all just kind of flip up. So the reason I show you this is I'll go into do that little house. How about that? Oops. Do the other one. It's very simple animation. So we have all this happening, right? But here are my keyframes. It's just one layer, right? Just one animation. Boom. What's that animation doing? So I'm going to create just a square. Oops. Like so. And then I'll just parent this to a null object. That's what these are called, okay? So look, so this is the motion. I only animated it once like this, and then I'm able to replicate that motion across all my layers and then offset their timing. So basically that motion is applied to each layer, bounces just the same, and if I want to change that, say I want to make that high point even higher, all I have to do is just modify this one layer, and now all of them are bouncing really high. And so this gives me flexibility to be able to animate fairly quickly and create a lot more visual interest without actually working that hard. The way I did this was actually using some expressions. So again, I mentioned these math-based, JavaScript-based expressions. This is pretty simple, but what you can do is I basically tell each layer, I say, look at this particular null object that holds that and follow that motion, but follow it offsetting the time to the moment where the layer starts. So see that? So these layers don't all start at the same time. So say I wanted to take this final layer and I wanted that to start way later, the animation will also follow way later. So this was super helpful. I was able to replicate this effect basically across the entire project, get all these bouncing buildings without having to work that hard. I was able to do that with just really, this expression stuff is really simple. I haven't taken it. School of Motion does have an expressions course, and I'm sure if I were to take that, I would probably learn a ton because I'm not like a super expert. So this just goes to show you can use some pretty simple stuff to create some cool effects. All right, what are your questions? Yes?
I have a couple. First of all, are you writing your expressions from scratch, or do you have some resource that you use to get the basics for what you're trying to achieve?
It's a great question, yeah. Am I writing my expressions from scratch, or do I have a resource? And the answer is yes. Some of them, especially if they're simpler, I can write them from scratch. There are some simple, like loop out, cycle, the one that I showed you with the antenna that's going back and forth, super easy. I wouldn't have to copy paste that. I got that up here, right? So, but some of the more complicated ones, this particular one I think might have been one of those more complicated ones, but I often augment them to my needs. So you can see up here, I've got a piece of a yarn that actually I can move this other layer around. It's in 3D space, and I can actually duplicate these layers and get other pieces of yarn, and they all kind of follow these 2 points. So I'm trying to remember exactly how I did this, but I probably started with an expression from somewhere. And then I think the expression it's possible the expression had more to do with how to get a line between 2 objects, and I needed it to put an image between 2 objects and then crop it so that I could always have this yarn. So yeah, so the answer is both.
Have you experimented with ChatGPT writing expressions?
I have not. You know, yeah, he says, have I experimented with ChatGPT and expressions? I've been getting some emails about that, and I saw a little bit of their demo on AE scripts, and it looks promising, but I also noticed that they're not promising too much just yet because they're like, hey, make this, yeah. All right, other questions? Yes?
So all of these things that you showed us, what exactly were they for? Because it seems like they're all part of the same thing.
That's a good question, yes. So there are a number of projects I showed. You probably saw a lot of blue backgrounds.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's all from one. So some of them are for a particular organization called Prager University. They do these 5-minute videos and all that. So I've done a number of videos with them. And then the one that I started out, this one, just, I guess, I was seeing a lot of blue, and so just made more blue, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was a different project. So this one is a 2.5-minute explainer video. Those other ones are 5-minute videos. Yeah, so that's where these projects are coming from. Yes?
Okay, so I'm more of an editor,
Okay.
and I want to add motion graphics into my repertoire of things that I can do as an editor.
Yes.
But I've never been good at like physical art or like digital art, anything like that.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice to me as somebody who's not particularly artsy in that sense?
Yes. So the question is, video editor, and we want to integrate motion graphics, but we don't necessarily have the drawing background or the artistic background. Me neither. Me neither. I don't have that either. In fact, that's why I'm talking about fundamentals here, because I was like, I want to take a drawing class now. By the way, you can take a drawing class, and I think that would help. But at the same time, when it comes to After Effects, it's so stinking easy to just get started. You can create, you can start to create simple animations pretty easy. I would say develop a aesthetic sense, and you can do that by finding good work. Even start by finding work other people say is good, even if you don't feel like you have a sense for what looks good. And by sticking to some of these fundamentals, even spending a little time learning some of those, you'll start to recognize what to look for. And when you start to know what to look for and how to arrange your work, and in a pretty systemic sort of way, there are rules, for example. You can break the rules, but if you stick to the rules, your work is probably going to be more consistently look good. I am not a huge fan of this idea that you just have talent. In fact, in the animation panel, I was a part of Todd, I think is his name. He's got the 30 years experience in animation. He's been doing this for a long time. One of the things he said is the best animators, to the best animators, talent is basically an insult. To say, oh, you're so talented, because that negates all the hard work they've put into their career. Right? So I think that's solid. So if you don't think you have that skill set, you can work for it. You can integrate it even in simple ways. And with these programs, you can do it a lot faster than it would have been in the old days. Other questions? Yes?
I actually recently, as an editor, switched from Premiere Pro, from Final Cut to Premiere to now DaVinci Resolve, and I do know that they have like almost like an After Effects page of sorts. Are you familiar with it? And if so, do you know how it might compare to?
You're talking about Fusion?
Yes.
Okay, yes. I have heard about Fusion. I have not looked into Fusion, though.
Okay.
So I was actually talking to John Clay, who's doing a talk right now, and he was saying that they've switched over to DaVinci Resolve in a lot of things. And it sounds like an amazing workflow. So I'd love to know more about that. You should, what is that?
It's a lot different.
A lot different. So you should talk to him. Okay.
I don't use it. I speak Adobe, so I stay in Adobe right now.
All right.
My
Okay.
editor switched from Premiere to
Resolve.
Resolve.
Mhm.
So I'm like, well, maybe I need to learn. So I haven't learned it yet. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another one I'd love to pick up, along with Figma, along with Spline, I think it is called. There's just so many programs popping up, and they're so good. Any other questions? Yes?
Your storyboarding, are you starting off by kind of hand drawing and then going into Illustrator, or what did you use?
So I got this tablet up here. This is a Wacom tablet. I use this as a mouse, actually, not just for drawing. But this really helps. I'll open up Illustrator and I'll use this, and I'll actually maybe create a little sketch in Illustrator with just a simple brushstroke pen, and then I'll start to, for something like this, I'll probably start to create vector art, point art, and that's typically how I go from there. One day I might scan in actual illustrations after I take that drawing class. Yes?
Do you have like a portfolio? That first video you showed, I want to show that to my.
Oh, sure.
wife and partner.
Yeah, in fact, resources as well. I put together a little page that says on the last page at the very bottom, there's some contact info, and the link came in. It looks like davidIBeal.com. That's David J. Beal. So just make a note of that if you want to go there. davidjbeal.com. You can find my portfolio and all that. If you go /resources, I started a little list of just helpful resources and plugins that I enjoy, some of the stuff from this talk, and that can be a helpful start. Even if you go, I think I put School of Motion at the top because I'm so pumped about them right now. So, yes. Any other questions? Yes?
What Prager videos did you work on?
Which Prager videos did I work on? There was one. Okay, I've done one on the Babylon Bee. That was the one with the washing machine. I did one about student loan debt. It was the one with the girl carrying the debt. Yeah, right. I did one on voter ID in Georgia, interestingly enough. And then one other one, I think. ESGs, economic social governance. Corporations should, we shouldn't just be profit. It should be others. Yeah. Yes.
What about the one with the girl falling out of the tree? Where was that from?
That was a video for my friend Bradley Pierce. It was for a company called Heritage Defense. They help represent. There's like lawyer firm. You know about Heritage Defense? So anyway.
Just from what you were saying.
Yeah. Exactly. They help represent, especially homeschool families. Things. Yeah.
I noticed that your characters don't have, or that their faces are blank. Are the attributes for a face, would you use the same principles for adding a face, or is that a whole other animal?
The same art principles.
Would you use the same techniques that you use for the whole character
For the face.
or is that just a whole other?
Yes, I would. But you'll notice I don't have faces. These faces are hard. But I do. Okay, I will show you. I was just working on this last night, and because I thought, character rigging and stuff, maybe I'll have a chance. But I will show you. I will show you a face because I did make a face, and then we'll close out here. No, that's. Oh yeah, that's it. Okay, look, it's a face.
Where?
Look, he's got a face. Chat. I looked up a YouTube video on how to draw a face in a 3/4. This is called a 3/4 pose, which is basically, well, there's my timer. The 3/4 pose, you're basically able to kind of put them off to the side, so this guy can actually walk forward a little bit, and there he goes. Boom. There he's walking. Okay. Yeah. I still need some work, but there he goes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.